Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Buddhist Insights, Empty Cloud. We had a bit of technical difficulties, so I'm just going to give it another 2 minutes, right, for this to pop out on people's feeds, because then it'll connect to YouTube and Facebook, and then people will see that we're actually on. So I'll just give it a minute or so. In the meantime, we can just kind of maybe meditate or stretch out and get ready for today's talk on the second factor of the 5 faculties, the second faculty, which is Viriya, energy. And I'm just going to give it some time for people to get advised by all their social media accounts. We got 6 people on now, and a like. So yeah, so just take some time to get comfortable, and maybe if you can recall what we covered last week, the first factor, which was Saddha, faith or conviction. Oh, we got Kit, hello, with Anjali's, Manal with Anjali, MGM San MCU, Sadhu Sadhu, thank you. Naranjan, hello. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Hello to our Nepali friends. Luisa, good morning. Yes. I'm just going to give it a little bit more time because usually if we schedule the event, people will know ahead of time, and they can keep track. But since we didn't post anything, maybe some people didn't even know that we had something going on today. But as soon as we go live, they'll get a notification on YouTube or Facebook telling them, hey, the monks are on today. So giving people some time to log on to their social media accounts and see their notifications. Yeah. All right. We got 12 people watching us now, 13. Looks like everybody's figuring out what's going on today now. Nice. Hello to everyone. So as I was saying, we had a bit of technical difficulties earlier today. We didn't post the event, so maybe some of you weren't sure if we were having one today or not. That's okay. Last week, we started with Saddha, the first of the 5 spiritual faculties. It's not actually the first. I mean, it's not a linear thing. It's just you need all of these 5 things to cultivate them. But I talked about Saddha, which is faith or conviction. And I'm going to continue today with the faculty of Viriya. Viriya, usually translated as energy. Strength is good. I like vigor. That's the one I'm going to go with today. So shortly, I'll start talking about it. So I think we can start now. And before I start, I'll just like to pay my respects to the Buddha. Namo tase bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhase. Namo tase bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhase. Namo tase bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhase. Okay, so I was saying today we're going to continue with our exploration of the 5 spiritual faculties. I think, I don't know how many live streams I'm going to have coming up because I'm leaving not this Friday, but the following one. So I'm going to, maybe next week, I'll sneak in 2 of them into one just to let everyone know ahead of time. I'll probably have to squeeze in 2 to make sure that I can cover all of them before I leave. Or if not, I'll do it remotely from my temple because I don't want to leave you with only 4 out of 5. Okay, hello. Let it go, let it be. Good morning to you. Good morning to everyone. We got 16 people watching live, 6 likes and a heart. Nice. And we got our in-studio audience. I won't neglect you this time. I remember that we actually have people here with us. Hello, everyone. Okay, so today we're talking about Viriya. And we find Viriya in many places, not only in the 5 faculties. We also find it in the Sattva-bojjhanga, right? The 7 factors of awakening. We find it here also in the Pancha Indriya, right? The 5 faculties. So energy is a very important, or Viriya is a very important part of the path. And usually Viriya is explained as that thing which helps us overcome sloth and torpor, tina mida, right? And it's said that the meditation or the contemplation that's usually associated with Viriya, with this kind of vigor, energy, or strength, is that of Maranusati, death. So reflecting on one's death, one becomes invigorated, right, to practice and not leave things for tomorrow. So you might be like, oh, later or tomorrow, it's too hot, it's too cold, I'm too hungry, I'm too full, etc., etc. But if you start contemplating on the nature of impermanence, on death, you'll see that you really can't be sure that you'll have some other time to practice. So the best time to practice is now. And I don't know about you, but when I found myself in dangerous situations where my life has been threatened, all of a sudden I get this rush of adrenaline and time slows down. And, so there's this kind of sense of impending death, of our mortality, that really invigorates the body and makes it completely alert, right? Your heart starts pounding, you start breathing faster, blood starts traveling throughout your whole body, your pupils dilate. So there's that kind of very physiological kind of strength, energy that comes when we notice, or when we think that we might die, right? That we might face our death. So that's usually kind of the way it's explained. Viriya is that thing that helps us overcome the five hindrances, right? The pancha nivaranas. The first one being sensuality, the second one being ill will. The third one, which this one's for, is tinamida, which is usually translated as sloth and torpor. And sloth and torpor doesn't mean like you're tired, right? Because you had a long day, or maybe because you haven't eaten the whole day. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is this kind of laziness that I was talking about earlier, where you're kind of bored, you're disinterested, right? Like you're coming up with all these excuses. Oh, I already meditated 10 minutes. That's good enough, right? Or like I said, it's too hot, it's too cold, I'm too full, I'm too hungry, etc., etc., etc. There's a time where you need this kind of reflect on, like, hey, there's no time for these kind of excuses. You ate today, you had water, you had plenty of sleep, you're healthy. All these other kind of excuses that we come up with are just kind of basically we're lacking determination and energy. And the way we can bring back that energy, right, refresh it, is through seeing the truth of how reality is, and about our lives, and about those ones that we love, that everything's impermanent. So the time to practice, the time to be kind, the time to be compassionate, the time for wisdom, the time for awareness, the time for all these beautiful factors on the path is now. Now is the time to do it. And that energy, that strength, that power, that vigor comes from realizing this. So really, we can use energy as a way to help us when we feel that we've kind of lost some motivation, that we start noticing that our mind starts coming up with all these excuses. That's the time when we become bored, which is usually, for me, like one of the main hindrances. When you do something for long enough, especially on long retreats, 5, 6, 7, 8 days, and you're meditating, you just start kind of getting bored after some time, especially once the mind settles down and you get tired of watching all the same stories play out in your head. Then the second thing, after being excited, it goes to the other extreme, which is like boredom, right? And then at that time is when you start recollecting, well, I only have like 3 days to continue this meditation program. I don't have that much time to stay on retreat, and to be on retreat is a blessing. And most of the time I'm doing other things, and I wish that I was here. And that kind of brings up this factor of Viriya. Some interesting things about like Viriya is that, in like traditional, when you look within the Indian context, it's kind of it has this connotation of like being heroic, right? Like this kind of like manliness or something, that when you find it, not only in Buddhism, but throughout like Indian culture, when you see this word Viriya, it has this sense of like enthusiasm, of heroism, right? Like kind of like the Buddha when he touched the ground, and I won't move from under this Bodhi tree. I will stay here until I reach awakening, right? Even if the flesh, rots off my body and all these kind of things. So it has this sense of, right, like of grit, kind of like grit and strength and power, but it's balanced, because we don't want to go too much the other way, where then it becomes a hindrance and it leads us to like being restless, right? Restlessness, anxiety, and things like that. So everything kind of has all the factors on the path. Even sati itself can be micha sati, right? Or samasati. So the same thing with energy. We want to kind of make sure that it's well balanced. And I want to share with you real quick this article from Bhante Sanāthavihāri, right? Or you might know him as Ajahn Thanisaro, where he talks about this factor, the second factor of the indriyas, right? Energy, Viriya, of the five spiritual faculties. And he says this about Viriya. He calls it vigor, which is the one, the translation that I like here. I'm with Bhante Sanāthavihāri on this one. Next to faith, Viriya, vigor, little need be said about the need for being energetic if one wants to achieve something, as I was saying earlier. Without vigor, without strenuous effort, without perseverance, one obviously cannot make much progress. Everybody knows what vigor is, although a generation which made the fortune of the discoverers of night starvation might wish that it had more of it. The fact that faith and vigor are virtues does not, however, imply that they are all good all through, and that, regardless of the consequences, they should be strengthened at all times. Excess is to be deprecated, even in virtues. All the five virtues must be regarded as one whole. So we're talking about all the five: Saddha, Viriya, Sati, Samadhi, and Upekkha, right? So they all have to be balanced. As I was saying earlier, it's not like you develop one or the other, but they're all kind of working together. Their balance and harmony is almost as important as the virtue themselves. They support each other to some extent, but they also stand in each other's way. One must sometimes be used to correct the excess of the other. In this way, concentration must come to the rescue of the latent faults of vigor, right? If you become too restless, then you want to bring in some more samadhi, right? Some more calmness. When vigor and energy have it all their own way, tranquility is in danger. We all know people with a large dash of adrenaline in their blood who are always busy, perhaps even madly efficient, but not particularly restful. Vigor itself leads to excitement and has to be controlled by a development of a concentrated mind. Then Bhante continues with, similarly, faith alone, which is Saddha, the one we talked about before, right? Without wisdom, can easily become mere credulity. Wisdom alone can teach what is worth believing. This can be illustrated by Don Quixote. Oh, I love that. Who in literature is perhaps the purest embodiment of faith, blind faith, actually, right? And whose actions demonstrate that too much faith by itself is not necessarily a good thing. Cervantes, Noble, gives a fine and detailed description of all the chief attributes of faith. Don Quixote vigorously, fearlessly, without complaining, and even serenely endures all tribulations because he wants to help others. All of them equally according to their needs. When he dashes into the middle of the boiling lake, he reaches the very height of self-abandonment of which faith as such is capable. And just when he does not know what will happen to him, he finds himself among flowery fields, beautiful beyond those of Elysium. His faith has conquered the senses and transmutes the data of common sense experience, and the barber's basin becomes Malbrino's helmet. And yet, when we consider the intellectual basis of his faith, we find it consists in nothing more than beliefs in the truth, a belief in the truth, and veracity of the romance which describes the fictitious and non-particularly edifying doings of the knights' errands of the past. This is the reason why his adventure form a sorry sight, why he is caricature even of a knight of the Middle Ages, why shorn of all common sense, faith in this case becomes slightly pathological. So he continues on to talk about the Quixote story, but I think that's enough. We get the gist of it. If none of you have read Don Quixote, I mean, I think this is a good plug for it. If Bhante Sanāthavihāri has read it and is endorsing it, you should take a look at it. It's a classic tale of blind faith, actually, and delusion. It's good for all of us to know if we're really following our dreams or if we're following our delusions. I mean, a dream is a delusion anyways, but if our goals are realistic in this life or not. And I like how Bhante, puts faith and Saddha and Viriya together, because if you have faith, the natural consequence of faith is to be energized, right? To be motivated to do something. So we can see how faith feeds, right? This belief, because faith is an idea, feeds into this more kind of physical, mental aspect of pushing us forward and keeping us in the practice. So it's beautiful how Bhante puts both of these two things together. And that's not the only place where we can see the combination of Viriya with another mental factor and how it counterbalances another factor. There's some nice quotes here by Bhante Analayo that also kind of talk about this. In his book, his first book on Satipatthana, he talks about one of the similes of the gatekeeper. right? There's this simile of a gatekeeper and how sati is the gatekeeper. And he says this about it: the quality of a careful supervision occurs again in yet another simile in which sati, right, mindfulness, awareness, is personified by the gatekeeper of a town. The simile portrays messengers arriving at the town's gate with an urgent message to be delivered to the king. The function of the gatekeeper is to inform them of the shortest route to the king. The gatekeeper image occurs again elsewhere in relation to the defense of a town. This town has energy, Viriya, as its troops, and wisdom, Panya, as its fortifications. While the function of the gatekeeper sati, or mindfulness, is to recognize the genuine citizens of the town and to allow them to enter the gates, both of these similes associate sati with having clear view of the situation, right? And how do we see here then Viriya? Viriya is that which defends the town, right? So what needs to come into the mind, right? Is sati. Sati distinguishes between what's kusala and akusala, and that's the function of the second factor of awakening, sata bojanga, which is the dhamma vichaya, right? Dhamma vichaya means investigation of phenomena. So sati is aware of what's happening. Dhamma vichaya says what's good and what's not, and then wisdom, right, and energy are the things that protect the town from these unwholesome things if they do sneak in, right, and keeping them out. The fortification, the wisdom, is the wall which doesn't let things in, and the troops are the things that defend your energy, right, from keeping things away, because it takes energy to be mindful of your senses, to practice indriya samvara. Indriya samvara is sense restraint or sense protection. It's so difficult nowadays for all of us, right, to not click, right, to not let ourselves be pulled in by all the influences of the world on social media and in person. It takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of energy to have that kind of resilience, right, when confronted with a whole river of influences that's coming against you. And I think that's why the Buddha calls, the Dhamma going against the stream. Buddhism is going against the stream. Imagine all the energy and work that it takes to swim against the stream. I don't know if you ever had to swim against a stream or against a current. It's very difficult. Actually, it's a very scary thing, especially if you're in the ocean. If you're on the beach and you get caught in one of those currents, you'll realize how short life is. You'll be meditating on death, whether you want to or not, because it's so scary. Or in a powerful river, if you've been kayaking or have to cross a river, you see what kind of strength, and not that much physical, but mental strength, so you don't freak out and you know what to do. That mental fortitude, which is wisdom also, right? The wisdom to know what to do and how to act skillfully and not. So here is another beautiful example of how we can apply energy or vigor in our practice. And then I wanted to share with you another example about how Bhante talks about how he works with, and this kind of connects to what I was telling you earlier. He goes, okay, kind of starts a little bit out of context, but you'll understand. Besides providing the foundation for the other factors, sati, or mindfulness awareness, is moreover the one awakening factor whose development is beneficial at any time on all occasions. The remaining 6 factors, we're talking about the 7 factors of awakening, can be split into 2 groups of the 3 groups. Dhamma vichaya, Viriya, and piti. So Dhamma vichaya is investigation of dhammas, right? Viriya is energy, the topic that we're talking about today, and piti is joy. Are particularly appropriate when the mind is sluggish, as I was saying earlier, and deficient in energy, while tranquility, passaddhi, concentration, samadhi, and equanimity, upekkha, are suitable for occasions when the mind is excited. So here it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with Bhante Tanisaro, right? And I was saying also that if you have too much energy, the mind becomes restless and the mind becomes agitated and anxiety arises and one can't practice properly. So in order to counterbalance that, we can develop the other factors. And here, since we're talking about the 5 spiritual faculties, we can focus on samadhi, right? Tranquility, unification or stillness of mind, and upekkha, right? Equanimity. Those 2 will help balance out the first 2, which is saddha, the faith, right? And energy, Viriya. And then we have sati right in the middle, which is perfect, which brings all these things together, right? Sati is kind of like the thing that holds everything. We become aware of all these other 4 aspects, right? We have saddha, we have Viriya, we have samadhi, we have upekkha, and with sati, we become mindful. And this kind of helps us balance all these other factors that we got going on. So we can see this beautiful interplay between all these different 5 spiritual faculties. And then Bhante continues later on in his book, the development and investigation of dhammas, dhamma vichaya, in turn arouses the awakening factor of energy, right? So being able to discern the skillful from the unskillful, the kusala from the akusala, brings forth, right, this kind of energy, viriya. The arising of such energy is related to putting forth effort, right? This effort of being able to discriminate. And this leads me to my rants that I always have about modern mindfulness, about how modern mindfulness is like non-judgmental. Whatever arises, just let it be, don't judge anything. No, you have to judge. You have to be able to discern. You need to be able to discriminate between what is skillful and unskillful, what is good and bad in your mind, right? And to be able to do that takes effort. It takes effort for you to be in your meditation and to notice unskillful, akusala dhamma, right? An unskillful state of mind arise and say it's unskillful. I mean, it's kind of way easier to kind of take this pseudo-equanimous position and just, whatever arises, let it arise. That's very easy. Actually, I had one person when I went to Spain told me, Bhante, the way you describe meditation sounds like so much work. I don't want to do that. I like being at peace in my meditation. Well, the path to awakening takes work, right? It takes effort, which is vayama. It takes energy, viriya. It takes diligence, right? Hard work, atapi. So it's not just about laying back and kind of like letting things happen on their own all the time. But if we see that our mind starts leaning towards the unskillful, right? Not only bad thoughts, but we feel our mind is becoming sluggish or anxious or worried or full of lust or full of confusion, then at that time we need to redirect our mind. We need to direct our mind in the right direction. And we see this in many suttas play out. We see this in the Vitakka Santana Sutta. We see this in the Dvaita Vitakka Sutta. We see this in many suttas where the Buddha is encouraging us, right, to like redirect our mind and make an effort to establish our mind in the wholesome. And that's what Bhante was talking about here, how through the effort we make in being able to discern, discern the skillful from the unskillful dhammas, this brings forth energy. The arising of such energy is related to putting forth effort. The discourse further qualifies such energy with the attribute of unshaken, right? Unshaken vigor, unshaken strength that you get from this practice. The qualification draws attention to the need for effort or energy to be applied with continuity, right? A specification which parallels the quality of being diligent, atapi, which I just talked about, mentioned in the definition part of the Satipatthana Sutta. According to the discourse, energy can manifest either mentally or physically, as I said earlier, as an awakening factor. Energy stands in direct opposition to the hindrance of sloth and torpor, tinamida. And we can also find energy not only from faith, but Bhante goes on to talk about, and also in another article that I was reading, they talk about the connection between joy and energy, right? When you feel happy, like I feel right now, you feel good, like you have all this energy, right? So when you start dwelling on the skillful states like nekkhamma, renunciation, which also means charity, dana, giving, when you start dwelling in loving kindness and compassion, which is not anger, avyapada, when you start dwelling on kindness, compassion with this abhihimsa, non-violence, you get this sudden rush of energy, right? From helping others, from being kind, and invigorates your body. You get this strength, you get this vigor, which is both, as Bhante said, mental and physical. They both happen at the same time. So there is a connection. There's a correlation between the piti, sada, viriya, dhamma vichaya, right? They're all kind of working together, and we need to kind of have this synergy between all these factors, as both Bhante Thanissaro and Bhante Analayo have been saying. And I also want to kind of share with you this kind of very unique, more psychological approach that my teacher Bhante Puniji used to like to share, just as a different way for us to relate to this. If we're many of us who come to the Dhamma in the West come to it from a kind of more, psychotherapeutical, psychological, philosophical point of view. And this kind of interpretation, or this way about speaking about how we apply Viriya to our more introspective practice as Westerners, as we tend to do, can be very useful for many of us. So I just kind of wanted to share this. And just let me bring it up again. I lost. Here we go. So my teacher Bhante Puniji says the strength of the cognitive over the affective, and it says Viriya. This is in his book called Arya Magga Bhavana. The realization that the cognitive process, mano, right, as in the Dhammapada, mano pupangama dhamma, mano seta mano maya, right, thinking, precedes the affective process, chitta. Chitta is that which knows, that which feels, right? Gives strength to the cognitive process to overcome the emotions. Here, Bhante, what he means emotions is anything that shakes the mind. The cognitive process has only to change the interpretation of circumstances and the emotional excitement stops. Self-centered emotions have been useful for lower animals for the preservation of life, but they can also be very destructive, especially in the case of the human beings who can use his intelligence to make it severely destructive. Yet the human being with his advanced cognitive process has the power beyond the lower animals in being able to delay the emotional reaction to get sufficient time to decide the best response to make in a given situation, right? To use our discernment instead of just reacting. So it is that saying, right? Respond instead of react. And act accordingly. In other words, he can rationally respond to a situation. Here, Bhante, when he says rationally, because I studied with him, he means with wisdom, right? It's not like an intellectual thing. Instead of reacting emotionally. This ability to respond instead of react is properly called willpower. This rational response is achieved, however, through the systematic introspection, which he calls satipatthana. This awareness of the need to stop emotions being aroused. The power of the human being as to stop the emotional arousal gives strength to the cognitive process. This strength of the cognitive process arose because of the cognitive process examined the experience within, and the examination was done because introspection was practiced. Thus, the systematic introspection flowed into examination of the experience, which flowed into the awakening of the strength of the cognitive process. So here, Bhante is just talking about this ability to be able to discern the wholesome from the unwholesome, right? As we heard earlier, when the practice of the Dhamma Vichaya, the second factor of this 7 factors of awakening, how through this process of being able not to give in to our reactions, not to give in to greed, hatred, sadness, and fear, invigorates our ability to discern, our ability to use our wisdom, right? As I said earlier, that wisdom were the walls, and energy, vigor, Viriya were the troops to defend the town, to defend the city. Here, Bhante is also trying to explain this process in a more kind of introspective, kind of Western psychological kind of from that kind of understanding. What's interesting, and then Bhante goes on to continue with piti, which is joy, and I just talked about the connection between piti and Viriya. And also, what I can say about this is that my teacher focused more here on the mental or psychological part of energy, and not so much on the physical part. But as Bhante Alayo says, the Viriya is not only a psychological thing, but it also has a physical part. So, I mean, I looked throughout the suttas, and there isn't like that much information on Viriya itself. It's always in combination with other things in all these lists, because we know Buddhists love lists, so it's always in a list form. Unlike other topics like sati or vitaka or kamma or tanha, where there's actual suttas for it, I didn't find much information on Viriya. But Viriya is also associated with vayama. Vayama means effort. So sometimes you'll see there is a lot of discourses on like the Chattari Samapadana and Samavayama, right, of right effort. But here, in those contexts of Samavayama and Chattari Samapadana, the 4 right efforts, that kind of effort means more like a exercise, like something that needs to be practiced, right? It's not talking about like the experiential level of how you feel the energy in your mind, how you feel the vigor in your body and mind, but it's talking about more this kind of these tasks that you need to realize. That's why it's called Chattari Samapadana, these 4 strivings that you need to accomplish. The first striving that you need to do is to eliminate unwholesome states when they arise in the to prevent unwholesome states that haven't arisen in the mind, to eliminate unwholesome states when they arise in the mind, the cultivation of wholesome states when they're not present in the mind, and the maintenance, right, of the wholesome states once they have arisen in the mind. These are the 4 efforts, right? So the 4 things that we need to practice, but it's not necessarily talking about that experience of feeling energetic that's going to help you overcome sloth and torpor. So sometimes you'll see this connection and it kind of sounds similar, but it's very different. The one effort is more like practical, like this thing that I need to do, these 4 exercises that I need to do. And Viriya is very much an experiential state, right? Like the contrary to sloth and torpor, as you experience when you feel tired and drowsy and lazy and bored. Viriya is very much invigorating, right? It's bright, it's powerful, right? And that's why sometimes we might need to balance it out with the more calm sides of the practice. Like Pasadi would be a great way to counterbalance Viriya when you feel it in the body. So if it's a somatic kind of Viriya or energy, what do? You practice Pasadi. Pasadi means to calm or to tranquilize, right? And when we look at the Satipatthana Sutta, very interestingly enough, or the Anapanasati Sutta, the practice, we find Pasadi right there when it says like Pasam Bayam Kayam. Usually it's translated as tranquilizing bodily formations, which I find very clumsy. And so people always have questions. What does that mean, tranquilizing the bodily formations? It just means pasadi. It means to relax your body, right? Like calm the body. Because sometimes in our meditation, when we're very focused in the beginning, especially when we're focusing like on the tip or the stomach, you get a lot of kind of energy. When the mind becomes very clear, it becomes very energetic, and we might have to counterbalance it. And a good way to counterbalance it is to do kind of like there's two kind of processes, right? Like down up process and an up down process. So the up down is like cognitive to the body, and then there's the bottom up is the body to the mind. So we can counterbalance our mind by creating a physical response of relaxation, and that will calm the mind. And we can also do it the other way around, so we can play with these kind of things. I always found it very interesting that if my mind is in a certain state, whether it's calm or excited, I can use the body. If it's too calm, to excite it, and if it's too excited, to calm it, right? And if the body's too excited, then I can use the mind to calm it. And if the body's too calm, I can use the mind to excite it. So it works both ways. And I think this is a very important teaching because, once again, I think for many of us Westerners, we're too much up here. And we think all the meditation, the whole path is up here in the head and the mind. But the body, right? The body is a big part of it. The first part of the Satipatthana practice is Kaya Nupassana, observing the body, right? We have the Kaya Gata Sati Sutta, which is the awareness of the body discourse. And we have walking meditation, standing, sitting, laying down. The Buddha says when fixing your robe, when chewing, when eating, when defecating, when urinating, one is mindful, right? So it's a very much embodied practice. So we also need to be aware of how all these teachings, all these kind of factors, all these faculties, including these five faculties, these pancha indriya, also have like an embodied sense. I mean, there's a certain feeling in the body that comes with faith. There's a certain feeling in the body that comes with energy. There's a certain feeling in the body of being aware of it, of the raw sensations, tactile sensations of sati. And there's a certain feeling that comes with samadhi in the body. And there's a certain feeling in the body that comes with upekkha, right? So it's not just all happening up here or wherever you think the mind is. It's very much an embodied practice that's also happening. So when we think about Viriya, we have to remember that it's both a psychological and a corporeal or physical process. So I think I covered a lot of things, and I see some things in the chat, and I won't forget the audience here. I'll be sure to leave it open for them now. So I'm going to go through the chat right here, through the comments, and see if there's any questions, and then we'll see where we go from there. So we just have a lot of good mornings. First class, grateful to be here from Sharon. Karuna with an Anjali. Charles Lee with an Anjali. Who else? More Anjalis from Egad. Namo Buddha from Sering, and George with Anjali. Mini says, what is the name of the book and author's name? Bhante, let me know once again. So one of them is an article from Ajahn Thanissaro, which you can find on his website, Access to Insight, accesstoinsight.com or .net. I forget what it is. Or you could just type in Google Thanissaro 5 faculties, and it'll come up right away. The other one is Analayo Bhikkhu's book on Satipatthana, right? And there he goes through the 7 factors of awakening, and he focuses on Viriya when he gets to that, the 3rd factor of awakening. That's another one. And the other one that you probably can't find online, or you can, but it's very difficult, is my teacher's book called Arya Magga Bhavana, right? The Noble Way, the cultivation of the Noble Way. If you want that, you can send an email to Empty Cloud, and I can send it to you if you want a copy of that. But yeah, those are the 3 sources that I was using. More Namo Buddhayas. Hello from Gurgel, Taripayil, Sarath. Miguel, hello, good morning to you. Let it go, let it be. I think my name might be misunderstood. I meant it. Let it be. Let it go. Let it be. Let it be. I mean to leave it be. To let it go and then okay. You're explaining your name. Thank you. Bigger energy without heedfulness is definitely a recipe for unskillful behavior. This is even true while sitting in silence. Yes, I agree. It's true. Yeah, as Bhante Sanāthavihāri and in the other articles that I was reading, energy in and of itself is neutral. It can be used skillfully and unskillfully, or wholesomely, unwholesomely. Just like mindfulness too, right? There's this whole thing about training, snipers and other people who are not doing good things in mindfulness, right? So there is Micha Sati and there is Sama Sati. There is Micha Viriya and there is Sama Viriya, right? So we have to remember that we need to analyze if it's leading us towards what's beneficial for us, for others, for all, promotes intelligence, not censored by the wise, onward leading, and takes us toward Nibbana, then that's the formula to analyze if something's skillful or not. And that's the formula we find in many suttas, and most famously in the Kalama Sutta, right? In the Kalama Sutta, that's the categories that the Buddha gives us to analyze whether we should take something as to be true or not. Minil says, what is investigation of phenomena? What characteristics are we trying to investigate about phenomena? And which phenomena are we talking about here? About anything. I mean, phenomena is just let's not get too philosophical about it. We don't want to think about like anomena and phenomena, right? Like phenomena is just like subjective and nomina is like something materialistic out there. Here, phenomena just means experience, like a state. So a state can be physical or it can be mental. It can be internal, it can be external, any type of state. We analyze whether it's kusala or akusala, right? If it's wholesome or if it's unwholesome, skillful or unskillful. But to keep it simple, whether it's good or bad, what does good mean? It's beneficial for me, beneficial for others, beneficial for all, promotes intelligence, et cetera, as I was saying, right? So we analyze physical sensations. We analyze our emotions. We analyze the thoughts. We analyze seeing, tasting, touching. We analyze all these things, our intentions, our desires. Everything's always being analyzed. We're observing it, right? And clearly comprehending it. Sati and Sati Sampajanya. We see it as it is, and whether it's helping us on our path. If it isn't, we get rid of it. Pahana, eliminate it, right? And if it's good for us, we cultivate it. Bhavana, we continue it. Anurakana, which means to maintain that wholesome state. So when we talk about the investigation of phenomena, we're seeing whether it's wholesome or unwholesome, whether it's beneficial or unbeneficial, whether it's in line with Dhamma or not in line with Dhamma, right? It's that's what we mean when we're saying investigation of Dhamma, Dhamma Vichaya. Okay, live in audience, yes.
So the two ways that I'm hearing you say of generating vigor, energy, physical and mental. Like the physical, maybe yoga or whatever exercises, right? If we put those aside, is there any generation of vigor that doesn't have to do with emotion? Like is it always dependent on generation of emotion when we're just using the mind?
I think here
you may have to repeat the question. I don't know.
Oh, I have to hear it. So the question was if there's a way to generate vigor, right, without emotion, right, in the mind. When we're just talking about the mind, we're leaving the body aside. Yes, there is. I have to think about how to explain it. So when you get into these levels of like upekkha, which is like very calm and still, there's a lot of clarity and spaciousness. There's a level of energy there, but it's not like very exciting. It's a very kind of like subtle kind of energy there. So I'd have to think about how to articulate that better. But yes,
for most of us, like on an average or beginner or even middling level practitioner, we're thinking about generating emotion, right? That's my question. Normally, unless we have the ability to reach, say, equanimity. But normally, I'm wondering, like, is it for me, like the energy that I've been able to generate is either through fear, being afraid, like afraid of samsara, afraid of an imminent death, or joyful about all the good things that I've done. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm doing great. And that like raises energy. But
Yeah.
either way, it seems to be an emotional thing. Like I get excited or I get really afraid.
Yeah. So we can use these kind of these states, right? So, I mean, even like when we talk about joy, although we're trying to avoid the body, I mean, it's very much a physical thing. You feel the joy very strongly, right? And if we talk about emotions, we can't separate emotions from the body, right? Emotions are always embodied. So yes, there is a combination of things that are happening when we bring joy. Joy is not only like a thought and an intellectual thing, right? Joy is not only like a physical sensation, right? There's also like an affect part, like you said, like an emotional part to it. So you know, I think that that's part of it, but I think there's more parts, and I don't think there's anything special about the emotional part. The thought part is just as important, and the physical sensational part is also just as important, and our intention also is just as important behind it. So I think it's the combination of all these things, and they all kind of need to be there. And that's kind of what these articles were saying, that when we develop any of these factors, we need to kind of counterbalance them with all these other ones. They need to be in synergy. So when we're developing joy, we need to make sure that it's within the within the schema of what we're trying to achieve, and it doesn't take us into like some manic state, because then it's very unuseful to just kind of be all manic there and sitting, like kind of crazy excited. So yes, there is definitely that feeling that comes all the time. Like when we develop metta, right? There's that feeling, that emotion that we could kind of feel to develop metta. If there isn't that feeling, then is it really metta? No, we're just kind of like reciting in our head, "May you be well." It's like parroting.
Yeah, that would be my question too. Like it seems like metta or karuna does generate energy through the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you really feel it,
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm so in love with the word, like I love everybody. Like it really feels to stimulate.
Yeah. Yes, definitely invigorating. It is stimulating, right? It's divine, Brahma Vihara, right? It's divine. You feel like you're in heaven. So yeah, definitely, there's definitely that aspect. It's definitely a part of it. But the interesting thing is that as we go deeper, like they start fading away. It becomes more subtle, right? Like metta, karuna, mudita is a little bit more like, and then you go to upekkha. Upekkha is like super subtle, right? Like I was saying earlier, you don't have that very strong kind of emotional thing. It's like a very subtle kind of energy. And even when we look at the jhanas, right? Like sukha and piti, they go, once you go to the fourth jhana, there's only one pointedness and equanimity. But there still is energy there, but they're just not like that strong as when we get into the first jhana, where it's like euphoric pleasure. So it's interesting that we start kind of here, we go here, and then we come like come back down and settle down again. So I believe that there's like somewhere in the middle, there's like a peak experience, and once we get there, it kind of calms down again, right? But we need that to kind of get us in.
Yeah, we're no longer vulnerable to lethargy or tiredness at a certain point in jhana, right?
Yeah.
Like that can't happen.
Yeah.
You're so concentrated.
Yeah. Nice. All right. Just more sadhus and thank yous on here. Anyone else here? Yes.
I was just thinking about how society is demanding so much of us now, not just by doom scrolling or whatever, but it's just like even to do your basic healthcare forms or whatever. There's a kind of a tax on our time that takes up, and I'm just so many, particularly women I know, with the pandemic have had to do. Their kids aren't launching as fast. There's just a lot more accelerated demands. Like how do you Viriya is difficult if you can't get the seclusion or the space in your life to even start reflecting and decide what's wholesome, not wholesome. You know what I mean? So how would you help lay people with that kind of situation? Healthcare structures are kind of falling apart. You have to do a lot more to even get healthcare because healthcare workers are burned out, school workers are burned out. So I don't know, just Viriya is an issue to even get to the point where you can apply these teachings.
So for me,
you may have to repeat that just summary because
they may not be able to hear.
They don't hear it.
Yeah. So the question was something like this. I'll make it brief. How do we find Viriya in our everyday lives when there's so many things that we need to do and things are so complex, right? And there's so many difficulties that, as a result of like the pandemic and all these other things that are going on. So my personal thing, what nourishes me in my practice to keep going is faith, saddha, and joy. Those are my main things. As I said earlier, I like to spoil people. I like to like compliment people and do things for people, which is really a result of like loving kindness and the Brahma Viharas and compassion, right? So through, acts of service, of helping others, being kind to others, really brings in that sense of like, it feels good and you get that kind of energy. And also thinking about the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, which means all of you thinking about your friends, like they're an inspiration, right? The monks are inspiration, the lay people are inspiration, all the community that's supporting the temple that comes here and feeds us, they're an inspiration. Remembering that there's people who are practicing now, practiced in the past, and are going to be practicing in the future. Like, wow, I'm part of this huge, like, infinite community, that goes on forever into the past and into the future. So drawing upon this inspiration to motivate you, right? And to bring joy, things that bring happiness. So sometimes when I'm finding something lacking in my practice, I'll look to a sutta. I remember, this sutta is very beautiful. I like this one called The Ancient City, and how like the Bodhisattva talks about how he's traveling through the forest and he finds a beautiful city. Anyways, I don't want to go into the story, but that inspires me. When I feel that I'm lacking, I go to that. It's in the Samyutta Nikaya. I'm like, oh, this is so beautiful. He tells the king, restore that city. And I'm like, yes, restore it. Let's restore the city. That's me. I'm the city. Restore it. Also chanting, right? I'll chant. Or sometimes like I'll think about my teacher, Bhante Kolita in North Hollywood. And I think about, I wonder what Bhante's doing. Bhante's practicing really well. He's taking care of all the people. He's such a good monk. I feel inspired. Like, my teacher's so good. I think about all the people who go out of their way to support me and make my life possible. I'm like, wow, such selflessness. Like, they're so selfless. Like, that's amazing. Sometimes it even brings me to tears. Like, I start crying because it's just so amazing how people are so compassionate. So that what brings me. It's hard to find that when you have to do these bureaucratic form things. It's hard. I don't really have a solution for that because I know they're necessary, but I kind of find it like it's completely ridiculous and dumb. Like, why even do it?
You also always have the fear thing, right?
Yeah.
If you really want to, if you really want to generate energy, just contemplate how little time we have left and how bad samsara is and how awful things could be in the next life.
I mean, we have different personalities, right? So I think for a greed type, which I'm more to, that's what works for me, the joy. If you're more an aversion type, then definitely the death one, right? The impermanence will work for you. If you're a delusion type, you just need to be around really wise people that can help guide you, They're kind of like those rails on the bowling alley for little kids that keep the ball from not going into the gutter. So these kind of modern things are, it's just, I don't really see a purpose to it. I mean, and it's obvious that I don't see a purpose in it. That's why I became a monk, right? And but for lay people, we need to find a way, to kind of make changes in the system, right? Sometimes Buddhism is seen as this very individualistic practice, and there's no external part to it. Like, Buddhism is just what I do in my own mind to myself, by myself, right? But it isn't like that. Like, when you read the suttas, like, the Buddha was engaged. He was talking to kings. He was talking to merchants. He gives a whole discourse, the Sigalovada Sutta, where he tells people how to act in society. There's nothing there about meditation in that sutta. There's nothing there about like impermanence or nothing. He's just like, hey, treat your wife and husband well, give your kids a proper education, and make sure that you get up on time. It's like very practical things that the Buddha is giving. So I think we need to kind of bring the Dhamma into our everyday lives. And maybe if we start by organizing our own life, we start by organizing our family life, our house, we start trying to pick careers or hobbies that align with Dhamma, right? We start associating with people, and we kind of like need to redirect, or kind of I'm hesitant to say kind of like, create a new society, that's in line with Dhamma, but not from like a Buddhist society, but a harmonious society, right? It starts with us. If we're just complacent and going along with like, well, I need to fill out this form and I need to go here, I need to go there. I mean, nothing's going to change. So there is a place for doing things. Even the Buddha, there's two occasions where the Buddha, he did like war protest. They were both silent and quiet. One is when he tried to stop the neighboring kingdom from invading his own kingdom. And he wasn't successful, although he tried for many days. He tried to stop the neighboring kingdom from slaughtering his own family. And another times when there was these two kingdoms that were going to go to war over water, which is, kind of very important for us nowadays with the water problems we're having. So we do see this kind of like bringing the Dhamma into everyday life and not just going along with what's going on, but it's we can't do it on our own, right? Like, I don't expect you to be able to change all of this and to be able to change the bureaucratic forms and all of that, but it takes all of us, not only at Empty Cloud or not only in Western Sanghas or not only in Asia, but everyone in the world, Buddhist and non-Buddhist, who are just tired of it, and want to live a more harmonious life. All of us have to come together and make those changes and not leave religion or spirituality as a private thing. I think that's been kind of the problem where we've kind of nowadays we're like, that world is one thing and religion and spirituality is something else that I only do in my house, or I do it at the church and the temple. That's a very convenient way to kind of keep things the way they are, So I think there needs to be this kind of more symbiotic kind of relationship between our practice and our everyday life and even the way things are being run.
Just thinking an example, my husband works for the VA, taking care of veterans, and he's a nurse. And in order to even help people now, and he tries his best, there's so much he has to work through. There's gaps in the bureaucracy. Then there's other things that he'll do it. He'll stay there, but it's really increased. And he's in a job that's right livelihood, and it's just.
There's some interesting things going on. Like in LA, I know of a community, I forget the name of it now, where like they share time. It's like, so everyone has different skills, right? And they put what they can do on this website or this app. And then like I dedicate an hour to like helping clean your house. And then there's like a therapist on there and he's like, oh, I'll give an hour of therapy. And another person's like, oh, well, I could take care of someone if they need help. And people are sharing time. And I know a friend who's been doing this for many years. Actually, that's how he's been able to get a lot of help that he needs. And then he also does other things to help people. So there's these collaborative ways that are happening. It's not on a large scale, but, stuff like that, we need to, promote it and say how good it is, right? And then also participate in it so it becomes bigger. So we just kind of have to work outside of the system. I mean, and that's what it means to be a monk. We leave the system and we start working outside of the system. When we do the monk's reflection, it says, I'm no longer part of the worldly system, right? You shave off your hair, you don't participate. We don't expect anything from people or from the government. If people want to give us things, that's nice, but we don't expect anything. We leave, we're outcasts. That's what it means to be a samana, a sramana, a wanderer. It means you leave everything behind. So there is this kind of sense in Buddhism of like, creating our own way of being, and lay people are somewhere in between both worlds, right? We're not completely in agreement with the way things are being run, but we can't completely leave everything behind. So there's that kind of that tension in the middle, but that leaves space for you to kind of like, okay, I don't have to completely participate. I can do my own thing in other ways. So that's also like, it'll give you some relief, so you won't be like 100% miserable, as Dan Harris says, 10% happier in his book. I don't practice. He doesn't promise full awakening or full happiness, but he says his practice of the Dhamma has at least given him 10% more happiness. And that's good, right? 10% more income would be nice, right? Also, no one's going to turn that down. Or 10% more, chocolate would be nice, or coffee. No one's going to turn that down. But I think we've come to the end of our time. I went a minute over only because we started late. But there's just some thank yous here from Sud and Bhumika and Emon Badua. Oh, Bangladeshi, I think. Badua is always a Bangladeshi name. It's beautiful. We got people from Nepal. We got people from India. We got people, Bangladeshi people. We got people from all over the world. I love this international community that we have here. I'll end with this. The Buddha says, in the same way that the Ganges and all the other rivers are known by their names as long as they remain on the land, but when all these rivers come into the ocean, they lose their identity and they're only known as the ocean. And the same way, people come from all castes and all parts of the world. But when they come into the Sangha, they leave those identities behind and are known only as the Sangha. Right? So thank you so much for joining us. And I'll see you next time. We'll talk about sati, mindfulness. And I'll probably combine it with samadhi just to make it short and I can get all the talks in there. So until next time, may you be well, happy, comfortable, and peaceful. Sukhi hotu. See you later. Bye-bye. Have a good day.